We're recording this before the G20 summit gets underway in South Africa that will start over the weekend. As many of you know, Chinese President Xi Jinping will not be attending the summit in Johannesburg. I wrote a column on LinkedIn that said, you know what, that's not a big deal. Xi, in many respects, has handed over summit duties to Prime Minister Li Qiang. Li Qiang will be going. Interestingly, Li is also going to be making a stop in Zambia. And I'd be interested to get your take on why you think they chose Zambia for Li to make a stop. I was speaking with a couple of reporters today about this and suggested that Zambia in many ways has deep historical links between the Chinese and Africa. The Tazara Railway, of course, is one of the showcases of China-Africa cooperation in Zambia and in Africa more broadly. But at the same time, Zambia is really ground zero and the center now for the great power competition over critical mineral supply chains in Africa. Copper, obviously, very important. Would love to get your sense as to whether or not you think Li is going to help do damage control in response to the Kafue River disaster by Sino-Metals leach. What's your take on the decision for Li to go to Zambia?
I think it's a mix of all these factors all together. You have the case of Kafue because it is the latest scandal that we heard about Chinese. In that case, we have a state-owned mine Chinese company being involved in those kind of in that situation. So we have that of that Kafue case. So you also have the narrative of the debt trap narrative, because let's not forget, for the last 4 years, Zambia has been at the center of conversation about debt relief and debt issues, and where China was mentioned so many times through the Paris clubs and all of that. So, of course, when you take all those elements all together, and they also mention the Tazara Railway, when you put all of them together, yes, Zambia has become that hotspot in terms of like narrative of China-US relationship, where you have like having the prime minister visiting Zambia. It's also somehow damage control, public relation, and all of that to try to address all those issues in the same time. But it really has that value in terms of like visibility. We are there, we are present, we have good relationship, and everything is good and everything is normal in our relationship with Zambia, and we're gonna keep on moving forward with Zambia. So it's a combination of all these factors together that just makes Zambia quote unquote a perfect stop, one stop on its way back to China for Li Qiang.
Yeah, and it might be also a boost to Hakainde Hichilema, the president, who is starting to ramp up his re-election campaign. He's got an uphill battle here right now because he came into office on the youth vote saying he was going to deliver results. And here we are, and there's a lot of criticism that's mounting against Hichilema that he hasn't lived up to the promise. And the Kafue River disaster is part of it in that sense, the pressure that he's facing. So maybe getting the photo up with the Chinese prime minister might be a good thing to bolster his support in the beginning of the election campaign.
It's depending because some can also weaponize having Chinese presence there as a bad thing. You know, when you know, for instance, how the U.S. Congress or the U.S. media had covered those kind of issues, it can really also be counterproductive for Zambia, because we have the Kafue case being before the courts, and we know the amount of money that have been taken there. We know the community have been impacted. So having Li Qiang being there, it's also at some point the question is it going to address the demand of local communities? Is Sino-Metals going to make a gesture to those communities? If it doesn't, it can really easy go the other way, and having that visit become a liability more than something good for Hakainde Hichilema to show to the Zambian public. So it's a very delicate exercise that's going to have to make here during this trip.
The president took a lot of attack and grief on social media after he posted a picture of himself with Don Trump Jr. who was vacationing in Zambia. And people said, this is absolutely disrespectful to Africa and to Zambians, because if, let's say, Hichilema's son went to go vacation in Washington, would Trump take time out of his schedule to have a picture with him? And they just felt that this was demeaning, that the son, who's not even in power, technically, gets a picture with the president. And yet Hichilema himself, when he went to Washington on his first visit, if you recall,
he didn't
even get Biden to visit with him or to take a picture with him. he got relegated down to the vice president, which, by the way, I speak with American officials about that still to this day. They don't understand why that is so problematic.
Exactly.
Said, well, of course. They just
don't
I
understand.
had a conversation about this the other day with a U.S. official, and I said, you know how disrespectful that is. And they were like, well, no. I mean,
why?
the U.S. president's busy. I said, you cannot imagine someone like Hichilema going to Beijing and getting relegated down to Vice President Han Zheng. Impossible to think about. But the Americans, this is a block with them. They don't get it. One last topic before we go, and this is really interesting. We talked about the Kafue River disaster. That's with Sino-Metals leach, 50,000 meters cubed. This is something that it's not 50,000 liters, it's 50,000 cubic liters is what I was corrected on, of how much toxic spill went from this tailings dam at the mine into the Kafue River system. I'll be honest with you, Geraud, after studying this now for the past 4 or 5 months, I have no idea if the situation is under control or if there's a hellscape that is now forming in along the Kafue River. It's very difficult. The narratives are complicated. They've been weaponized. Very, very difficult to ascertain what's going on. That being said now, about a week or two ago, we got news, though, that in the DRC, another dam spill occurred, this one from Zhejianghuayo Cobalt. You're saying it's not on the same scale as what happened in the Kafue River.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, here we have yet another toxic spill. Tell us about what happened in the DRC.
So we have a subsidiary of Zhejianghuayo Cobalt in the DRC called Congo Dongfeng Mining, which has its operation on the outskirts of Lubumbashi, which is the second city in the DRC, southeast of the country, the capital of copper of the country. So we had the CDM has a plant, a copper and cobalt plant around in that town, and there was a spill coming out of its plant into neighboring neighborhood around this plant, and they enter into communities, enter into the small body of water that around those communities, and of course it led some people in the communities to leave around and to move away from the plant, and of course it created a scandal, rightfully so. And the Minister of Mine had to visit the CDM plant, talk with the leadership of the company, trying to understand what happened, and especially having the guarantee that will not happen again. But apparently there was enough strong guarantee provided to the Minister of Mine, and he decided to suspend CDM license for 3 months. That happened before, not for the CDM, but for another company, for ERG, it happened before. So yeah, that's basically the standard procedure of DRC mining code that recommend when those kind of cases happen.
It did not take long after this happened that the United States Department of State turned to draw attention to this, and I'm quoting here now from the Bureau of African Affairs. This is the Assistant Secretary of State, which I don't think they have an Assistant Secretary of State, so that's a little bit weird right now, but okay. They said the devastating mine spill in the DRC by CDM, a Chinese mining company, highlights its negligence and disregard for the Congolese people. This same company's workers recently kidnapped and assaulted Rendezvous CEO, Chief Operating Officer and U.S. citizen Preston Mendall in September. These actions contrast with U.S. companies who follow environmental regulations, create jobs, transfer skills, and expand opportunities for the Congolese people, underscoring the importance of the U.S.-DRC relationship. We commend Minister Watum for suspending CDM's license and look forward to working with the DRC government to attract more responsible investment that drives mutually beneficial growth. When you hear that, Geraud, what do you think?
It's not helping at all. It's really not helping. It's just like in the case of the Kafue River, where the US also made a similar comment in that situation. So it's really not helping. There's no need and there's no point of geopoliticizing this kind of situation. It doesn't help anybody. That situation happened. It needs to be dealt with. But to use it now to make it a kind of geopolitical point of narrative point to try to move forward in those conversations, to move your own agenda into the DRC, I think it doesn't help. I understand the appeal. I understand it's a easy 3 point that you can use in terms of political narrative, but it doesn't help. On the ground, it doesn't change anything. And when you see US companies being different, I don't think that the Jamaicans will agree with that statement when we know how US companies have been behaving in Jamaica. So yes, it's really not something that you can really come and say, yes. No, for me, geopoliticizing the issue has even more the risk of, it even create the risk of like having China also reacting by saying, if we see Congolese NGO reacting and trying to have more action, the Chinese is going to say it's not because of Congolese agents, it's only Congolese wanting justice, wanting clarity in all those situations. It's because the DRC has been weaponized by the United States to counter China's presence in the DRC. It's going to take us back to what we saw in Zambia. We've covered that a few weeks back, where we had all the Chinese social media standing up and talking about how Zambian NGO asking for that. It was because of the US being behind. So all those situations, when you create those situations, it helps you in terms of USC for your narrative. But for the DRC, for the Zambians, how does it help us? It doesn't really help us to move forward.
Okay, well, let's leave the conversation there. Obviously, a lot going on. We're going to talk next week. We'll bring Cobus on to talk about Li's visit to Zambia, the G20. We're going to get Geraud and Cobus's take. We'll do a roundtable on that one. So much obviously going on. This always happens at the end of the year where everything just kind of ramps up. By the way, we have some fantastic shows also lined up with researchers at the Rhodium Group and AidData about new reports that they've just released as well. So keep an eye out for those shows. So a lot to talk about.